You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Moses Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There are these things that makes official. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you, tries to make you better, improve the quality of your life, get you to learn things, get you to improve all the stuff you're always doing in life, and master the skills that you need to do. We've got another wonderful young lady on the show with us today. We're going to get into her insights and some of the stuff that she's going to learn, talk about my favorite subject, not by my choice, ADHD. Squirrel. Anyway, we're going to get into it with her. Her latest book came out June 20th, 2024, called Psychology Within the Concepts. Let me recut that because I kind of flubbed the word context. Psychology Within the Context of Psychiatry, Closing the Translational Gap. Amy Twilegar joins us on the show today. We're going to get into it with her and find out all this great stuff to know about ADHD and why they call it the CEO disease. Maybe we'll get some of that from her, or just how much fun it is to have it, because I love mine. Kind of sometimes. She's a postgraduate student dedicated to raising awareness for and furthering her educational pursuits and identifying confounding variables often overlooked in the assessment procedure protocols for classifying mental disorders such as adult ADHD, or the poster child for it, Chris Voss. Welcome to the show. How are you, Amy?
Great, thank you. How are you?
I am excellent. So give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Are you talking about my websites?
Yes.
Okay. Translationaldevelopmentalpsychobiology.com. That's a mouthful, I know. And at authoramytwilegar.com.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your book?
Well, it's a newfound perspective on redefining the constricting variables to measure ADHD in adults. Research has been extensive with, as we know, it is a childhood disorder, as we all know. They have linked very significantly PTSD in childhood with adult ADHD, as well as severity of trauma experienced in the home environment in childhood with ADHD in adulthood. But they're missing something.
Oh, what are we missing?
They're missing the developmental construct.
Okay. So give us a breakdown as to what that means, if you could, a foundation for it.
So the DSM-5 currently says that it has to be present in childhood. You cannot get the diagnosis without it being present before 12 years of age. And it cannot be comorbid with anxiety disorder, both of which I counter that actually with my research in my book.
Okay. So now you mentioned the DSA-5, or there was something about a 5 that you mentioned.
Yes, the current diagnostic manual for mental disorders. There
you go. So we want to make sure we lay a foundation for people that are just the laymen out there in the world trying to figure all this good stuff out. What made you want to write this book? What was the proponent behind that inspired you?
Well, there's a lot of adults out there that have ADHD and they can't get the treatment that they need because they can't receive the diagnosis without childhood records of having ADHD as a child. That is at the heart of what stemmed my inspiration to write this book, because if you look at the developmental constructs, if you have an abused child that grows up in fear, they are susceptible to developing ADHD in adulthood if in the next set of intimate relationships at 20 to 22 years old, typically, there's a problem there because they're gonna be more susceptible and prone to develop ADHD in adulthood.
Mhm.
And the diagnostic manual to diagnose ADHD in adulthood states that it must be present in childhood and that anxiety cannot be a comorbid condition. But my argument to that is that they can be predisposed by anxiety related to trauma experienced in childhood
Hmm.
and more vulnerable to developing ADHD in adulthood at that critical phase of development of young adulthood years when the next set of intimate relationships, romantic partnerships, for instance,
Mhm.
they experience the abuse again, then their attention spirals out of control and they're in real trouble then because their dendritic cells in the brain are crystallizing for emotion self-regulation patterns. And if you're internalizing at the focusing on the internal distress experience inside, those patterns set the stage for a lifetime of attentional problems.
Wow. Wow. Now, that makes sense because, sometimes when we have trauma in childhood and we have these blueprints, and I'm not a psychologist, so correct me if I'm wrong, but we talk about this a lot on the show, it seems these days. Um, I- is I suppose when it rears its head in older ages, it's kind of a fight or flight symptom we have where we're like, oh, I know what this danger is, and now I'm seeing it again, and here's how I'm going to react. Is that a good assessment?
Absolutely, because the hypervigilance,
Hmm.
constantly looking over your shoulder out of
Ah.
fear, for instance, that really translates into hyperactivity, which is an H component in ADHD. So if you experience trauma in childhood in an abusive home environment, you can become resilient all you want as an adolescent, but if you enter your next set of close, intimate relationships at that critical phase of development for young adulthood years, you're going to be re-experiencing it. And research shows that you're you're in trouble. It comes back threefold the experiences to you, and so then they can't get diagnosed because they don't have childhood records. They were a
Oh.
scared child, and so therefore now that they're in adulthood and they have a voice of their own, and they are able to depict that something is wrong.
Hmm.
They can't get diagnosed. And it's already too
Wow.
late. It's irreversible at that point because the emotional self-regulation patterns are already
Hmm.
set in stone for the rest of their lives.
Huh. And that kind of leads to if they can't get diagnosed, then they can't get help. Is that correct?
Yes. As a matter of fact, they often get misdiagnosed with
Ah.
depression. They get antidepressants, for instance. And
Hmm.
when they say anxiety cannot be a comorbid condition, that's an interesting one because anxiety and depression are one and the same on a spectral level because it's hyper arousal nervous system activity versus hypo arousal nervous system
Hmm.
activity. So it all has to do with emotion self-regulation. And there's only one neurobiological connection between the prefrontal cortex for higher order cognitive processing, such as problem solving skills and reasoning abilities, and the limbic system, which ironically is aggression and fear based. And
Hmm.
so there's only so much attention that you can allocate in it's called the right frontal striatal cerebellar network in the brain, or right putamen is what they're called too.
Oh.
And it shows in the metabolic pathways, as I show in my book even, the ADHD brain, this is for control subjects and for adult ADHD subjects. There's a stark difference, obviously, in the metabolic pathways for oxygen that occur in the controlled lab setting, and um, it's evident. So I have more to say about that, but
Okay. So, one of the things that happened to me as a child is I experienced trauma as a child, and then the home life wasn't great. Let's put it that way. And so my ADHD and my brother's ADHD became instantly recognizable. I would check the door 20 times a night as a teen. I was, I think there were other obsessive compulsives that I had. My brother had the obsessive compulsive where he would wash his hands. He needed to be on Ritalin, things like that. So our stuff showed up right away. It became a response, I think, right away. What percentage of people do you think does it show up in right away, as opposed to what you're talking about, where sometimes it may not show up until later in life?
Probably about 8%.
8%. There you go. Now, 8% that it shows up later in life, or
About
the
one
other.
about 1% are going to be diagnosed because it's virtually impossible to get diagnosed without having it present in childhood. And those are the rules that they go by to
Wow. Wow.
to diagnose it. And their hands are tied. I mean, what they put on paper, a psychiatrist has to go off of that. And if they can't diagnose based on those measures that should be changed,
Mm-hmm.
they're in trouble. They'll get misdiagnosed or just suffer.
Now, with my ADHD, um, they did prescribe me for depression, but my psychiatrist or psychologist, I forget which one gives you the medication, which one just gives you counseling, whichever one gives you medicine. But, he did hear about my childhood, and he was like, my God, you had two narcissistic parents at the same time. Most people just have one. So, I guess he diagnosed me based on that. What is the main target audience that you're trying to send the message to that you want reading the book?
Honestly, I think the criteria should be changed because there is a solution to this.
Mm-hmm.
Even though clinicians cannot yet diagnose ADHD in adulthood without the childhood records, they can certainly tell them to go get the brain scans and the neuroimaging scans on your brain from a radiologist, for instance, and map that theoretical framework onto that biological data. And it's unmistakable that if you're taking that case history of that individual and you're seeing their brain scans are clearly different than that of a normal control subject brain, it's unmistakable. So it should be considered, and anxiety absolutely is a precursor. So that's those are two different things that I would like to get across with my book.
Ah, there you go. So with the book, that's the main reason you wrote it, I guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. And what got you interested in this? What got you interested in the study of this? Was this your original intent when you went into psychology, or did you find that this was a real issue during that time?
No, as I was doing research through my psychology classes, I kept seeing in all the research studies that it says that it has to be is present in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it never mentioned adult development of it. And so I thought there's something wrong here. And I researched it more, and lo and behold, it's a problem.
How can psychologists redefine these constructs for diagnosing ADHD? Do they have to go through some board and a bunch of people have to write papers on it or something, or how does it work?
I'm not really sure. It's an extensive task, I'm sure, but this is my contribution to get the word out there and raise awareness that it can develop in adulthood, absolutely, from a scared child, and then they have a next set of close intimate relationships in an abusive environment or relationship, then they can't even get diagnosed.
Yeah. And there are things that happen with children. We've talked about this on the show where it seems, and I'm not a psychiatrist, folks, so, don't start a cult or from whatever I say. But it seems like sometimes in childhood, we're so overwhelmed by a traumatic experience that the brain kind of blocks it away and makes us forget it. And then later in life, it seems to bring it forward when it thinks that maybe we're developed enough to handle what happened to us as a child. And I can imagine maybe a scenario of where that would apply to your thesis of, them not remembering their childhood issues and then suddenly having these issues are coming up and not realizing how they're connected. Maybe is that a possibility?
Absolutely. But you just better hope you're not 20 to 22 years old in that critical phase of development when the brain matures in that emotional regulation patterns, and now you have dysfunction emotional patterning, and your attention is going to spiral out of control, focusing on the internalization distress inside rather than the salient cues in the environmental context. And by that I mean social environmental context.
There you go. So what changes do you foresee from publishing your work in the future? Have you sent this to to, I don't know, who oversees the psychiatry? Is there a psychiatry board or a bunch of people that oversee that sort of thing?
Well, it's not exactly a field yet.
Okay.
So it's you're converging the two fields in a way that the medical and the clinical. I mean, it's going to be a tough one to get
Oh,
this.
are there boards for each of them?
Yes, they
Or
go to different. One goes to medical school, then
Mhm.
philosophical school. So I mean, it's hard to converge them in an integral way,
Mhm.
to where the psychologist would be able to diagnose without those rigid structure criteria measures not being changed.
Yeah. Is there a way that you could get each of the individual boards to agree on this, or does that take a lot of work, or how does that go?
I wish I knew.
Oh.
I wrote this book as, to help other people and to get
Mhm.
the ball rolling to say, hey, word should get out that this needs to at least just change a few things to say, have psychologists get those neuroimaging brain scans. And then if you map that theoretical framework onto that biological data is unmistakable. That's in the research too, as well.
Mhm. Now, do these brain scans, can you look at a person's brain, I guess, and determine that they have either trauma damage or they have ADHD? I imagine the frontal lobe cortex being overactive with high amount of activity on it. I'm no scientist, folks. It would be an indication of that, right? Maybe.
Absolutely. On page 48 of my book, I even put it out there. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
and then, yeah.
Yeah, I was when I had my ADHD, I was trying to figure out, what was going on with me. And I remember reading it was I can't remember what it was. But it was a thing that talked about how basically the theory of what my issue was is I had a over I had an over abundance of activity in my frontal cortex. It's kind of why my front of my brain would hurt when I have my panic attacks. I thought I had brain cancer or something because it was just crazy. But yeah, so this is pretty interesting. We've talked about ADHD on the show, how it's kind of the CEO disease. A lot of CEOs tend to have it. And it actually kind of helps us be better entrepreneurs, which is kind of interesting. uh it's my I thought was under control from old age, and then a year and a half ago I went in for testosterone treatment, and boy, it came back like something else. And I've been fighting with it ever since again. So I thought I finally got relief from it all my life. So how do you believe this might implement a fundamental change in the industry, and how can it be achieved? I suppose we've kind of been talking there and kicking away that around.
I think getting the word out, like with this book, for instance, is step
Yeah,
number one.
yeah, yeah. What are the reactions that you've had of the book so far in the scientific or social communities?
The reviews I've gotten are rave reviews from
Mm-hmm.
the feedback. So,
Mm-hmm.
nobody disagrees with it, so it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. And so, give us an idea of how you were raised. What got you into psychiatry, psychology, wanting to study this stuff and get to know it? What was some of the influences you had?
Well, my first interest was in my college years, actually.
Hmm.
And after I started taking some psychology classes, I really, really enjoyed them. And I started seeing patterns through, like, with dichotomous viewpoints, nominal labeling, such as,
Hmm.
saying it has to be present in childhood, or you do not ADHD, or you are or you're not, based on these rigid structure criteria measures. So when I started to notice that there was a lot of developmental constructs that were not being addressed, it got me interested in really diving into seeing why. And I kept coming across all these literature articles that were saying that there's more research that needs to be conducted for the etiological significance, for instance, in order to deem an adult ADHD patient as actually having ADHD, and I just put it all together like a web, and I saw what was missing, and I want to make a difference.
Do you suffer from ADHD? Was that one of the reasons you kind of had like a firsthand knowledge of it and stuff?
I'm familiar with ADHD a little bit.
There you go. I'm too familiar with it myself. I could use a break every now and then, but squirrel. So there you go. But it really is helpful in business and stuff. I don't know. It's helpful, I think, and a lot of CEOs have it. It's amazing. It's high vigilance, I suppose, and paranoia, maybe. Anyway, so there you go. What have we discussed about your book that we want to tease out to people and entice them to pick it up?
Well, it's going to allude into what the structural changes in the brain are, and that's at the very basic level for this book. Anyways, it's more of a research compilation to say all of these studies put together. This is what is happening out there. There's people that suffer every day, really. And in my next book, my upcoming book, Translational Developmental Psychobiology, is really at the forefront of it making a change.
There you go. Well, making a change, making a difference. This is what we do in the world. We write books, we share our ideas, we publish and convince others of our ways and lay out our arguments and stuff like that. So there you go. So as we go out, give people a final pitch out to order up your book and your .coms and all that good stuff.
It's on many platforms, actually. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Westbow Press. It's everywhere. Flipkart books. There are even textbook sites. So if you just look up the my name, for instance, or the title of the book, it's unmistakable that it's out there.
All right, sounds good then. Well, thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonas, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Order up her book wherever fine books are sold. It's called Psychology Within the Context of Psychiatry, Closing the Translational Gap by Amy Twilegar. Thanks, Jonas, for tuning in. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, facebook.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTokity and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that's